Baselode Energy here with an update from the Hook project as we still wait patiently for assays. I have to mention that we are 36% of our samples that we've submitted. We're still waiting on those results. Most recent update from the labs that basically we're still looking at another 2 to 3 weeks from when they had originally told me so. We should start receiving assays back soon. We are 25 to 28 weeks out from when the samples were dropped off. This is quite ridiculous. It's over half a year, but this is what it is. The holes that we're waiting for are the ones that intersected mineralization at ACKIO, but also the remainder of the exploration holes in and around the Hook area. But what we want to focus on right now is this clay alteration. We did have a news release out in September of last year. Very excited about this clay alteration. We do have results back from two of the drill holes, holes 16 and 17 that first drilled into it. There's ACKIO in that red circle, and then there's the clay alteration in that blue structure that you see coming down from ACKIO. It's only about 5 kilometers away. But even initially, when we saw this clay alteration, it really struck us. This is the type of clay alteration that you do see around massive deposits, and we've got 100 meters of continuous clay alteration. You can see the person just carving up the core with a scribe. So that's very encouraging. That indicates that we're onto a hydrothermal system. Alternatively, you can crush the core with your finger. That's not supposed to happen. That's supposed to be rock, but now it's been converted into clay, so a lot of fluids have moved through there. What drew us to the area originally was this gravity low target, and we drilled the first two holes on this section, and then we drilled a third one on that fence as well when we came back to the area, which also included us going to drill hole 22 and hole 23 on either side to provide us with a vector outside of that fence. So we're waiting on those last three drill holes, holes 21, 22, 23, to really paint the back end of the picture, because this is what the cross section looks like. Hole 16 we drilled first. There's that big clay alteration and that blue polygon. The entire drill hole is basically altered. It's quite substantial. Hole 17 that we went up dip, and we saw the clay alteration kind of diminish and the structure really diminish overall. And then when we followed up with hole 21, we saw that the clay alteration increased. It did get stronger. So we're waiting on those assays. But we're going to just quickly look at using lead isotopes as an exploration tool and how this can really be exciting for an area like this. And to understand it all, there are basically four principal lead isotopes that account for 100% of the lead that we see in the world. 2% of that lead 204 is naturally occurring lead, whereas the remainder of the isotopes are all products of the radioactive decay series. Lead 207 comes from decay series uranium-235. Lead 206 comes from U-238, and lead 208 comes from thorium-232. We're not interested in thorium, so therefore I'm not going to look at lead 208. And because uranium-238 is far more prevalent in nature than uranium-235, 99% of the uranium is uranium-238, we're going to look at lead 206 as a proxy. And we're going to compare that to lead 204. So we're going to just take a simple ratio of lead 206 to lead 204. That's what we're going to work with. The chart on the left, again, just reiterating from chart on the left from Wikipedia, reiterating that we have our four main lead isotopes: 204, 206, 207, 208. They're all stable. They're not radioactive, and there's their general abundances. The graph on the right is the uranium decay series. So uranium-238, we get down to lead 206, and there's no other way to get lead 206. You can't take uranium-235 and it decays down to lead 206, or thorium-232. No, it's only uranium-238 that decays down to lead 206. So if we take those two abundances from Wikipedia as just a very simple starting point, we say, okay, well, there's 24.1 percentage lead to 1.4% lead global abundance. That gives us a ratio of 17 to 1. So for every one ppm lead 204 that we see, we'd expect to see naturally 17 ppm lead 206. And that's the premise that we're going to work with very simply here. We're going to assume that is a background, that is, the global average. That's what we would expect to find no matter where we drilled. The only way we would see things differently is if there's less lead 204 or more lead 206. How do you get more lead 206? You have to have more uranium 238. So let's say we double that ratio. Now we're looking at the ratio is 34. We've basically increased lead 206. Lead 204 remained the same. Gave us a double ratio. What does that mean? We've had more uranium in the system. And if we continue to increase that lead 206 side relative to the lead 204 and get higher ratios, that simply means that we've had more uranium. You had to have uranium there to decay into lead 206. That's how this works. Fortunately enough, I've been around Athabasca deposits. I've worked on a number of them. I've had access to publicly available data that has lead isotopes, and I've been able to piece together what I consider to be a vector tool, it's just another tool in our exploration strategy. It's not a one-to-one saying, oh, there's definitely a deposit here, but I've used this quite frequently to find these pathways and to start isolating what are the things that you should really look at, what along with other tools, exploration tools, do these things paint the vector that we should focus on. So just looking at this one, you can see this chart is really weighted to a lot of reds, and the reason for that is because basically when you're in the red, you should really be on a uranium deposit. It's typically that tight. Not very often do you see a lot of red outside of non-mineralization. It can occur, but it's very infrequent, at least in my career. Anything that's green above background, that should be considered depending on the scope and where it is observed. For example, we're just going to assume a very background schematic. This is not the drill holes that I'm about to show do not actually pertain directly to the cross section. It was just ease of demonstrating things. If this was a drill hole and we came back with one sample here having above background lead isotopes, I would assume that it's not of interest. I would really walk away from it. If we saw something very similar to the situation that I've just presented here, where there's a lot of little lead isotope above background lead isotope anomalies, again, it's one of these things I really wouldn't consider as prospective. It's just that seems to be a background drill hole. However, something like this, where we do see you have your little smatterings of above background. Maybe there's an anomalous sample that occurs quite frequently too in a background rock, but something like that green thick interval, that would kind of raise a little bit of a question in the back of my head. Is that we're seeing alteration or structure in the area? Is it lithologically controlled, such as a pegmatite could be responsible for something like that? But even this type of results could fall into a typical background scenario. But let's look at the hypothetical scenario around ACKIO. And this is based on a summary of what we have for ACKIO, but when you've got tight control around mineralization, yeah, the lead isotopes are just screaming hot when you're in mineralization, and very quickly they've got anomalous to above background buffer, and then they just disappear into the background. That even in between the mineralization in those two pods there, you don't get a lead isotope signature. There's no structure, and the alteration is not strong in that area to have allowed the fluids. But if you get another scenario where you're closer to structures and there's just more fluid pathways, then you can get these larger lead isotope anomalies that are continuous to really develop. Providing, if I saw a drill hole like that, no mineralization, I would be all over that in a heartbeat. That just, to me, that would scream, hey, we've got the fluids moving through here. Let's look at a scenario where we go through multiple pods of mineralization. I would expect the whole thing to be basically screaming hot with lead isotopes, even in the areas um, that are not mineralized. They would be so close to each other that I would expect that those fluids and the structures and the alteration would have affected all those rocks, and then you get tight boundaries on either side. What if you're outside of mineralization? Well, again, you wouldn't expect to see a lot of that red. You'd expect to see mostly anomalous. Maybe you would have a little bit of red smattering, especially if you're on trend and you're within 5 to 10 meters away of mineralization, like this drill hole would be. It's only 10 meters away. You wouldn't really expect to see a lot of red. You'd expect to see a lot of green and maroon. And if you're between 40 to 50 meters away from mineralization, as I've seen plenty of times, you could have a hole that really looks like a background hole. There could be nothing indicating that you've got uranium in the system. And sometimes it's just that sharp and that discrete. Let's look at the results from hole 17 though. The whole purpose of this video, hole 17, to me, that's screaming hot. We've got a 50-meter zone of continuously high lead isotope ratio. Lead 206 to lead 204 has anomalies or a ratio that is indicative of it should be a uranium pathway. and even on its edges, on its margins there, it is anomalous. There is something interesting in this area, especially since we know that that clay alteration is there. There's something here. Been a fluid pathway. When we hole 16 here that's just popped up, the system looks stronger. The intervals are more continuous. There's more lead anomalisms here. Even between the two strong red areas in both of those drill holes, it is stronger. The average lead isotope ratio is higher in hole 16, the lower hole, than it is in hole 17. Which is why waiting on hole 21 is very critical, because if we start to see the lead isotopes pick up even more, then it provides us with more of a belief, more of a strong scientific reason for there to be mineralization. Because the big kicker out of this whole thing, yeah, we're looking at lead isotopes. Why are we doing that? Typically, you'd find uranium with these things. When you're in the red, I've tweaked these ratios to really catch things that are 40 ppm and above. Because, and there's typically a good correlation between these. We're not seeing that. We're seeing a tenth of the uranium, but we're seeing these lead isotopes that are indicating that we should have had uranium here. So what the heck's happened to all the uranium? The uranium's moved. That's the only thing we can really take away from this. And again, if when we see hole 21, when we get the results from hole 21, if they're telling us that things are even better as we go deeper, then that's our target. That's our vector. When when the uranium decays into lead becomes really stable. It will not move in the same oxidized fluid systems as uranium does. Uranium remains this very mobile element that likes to move in certain fluid conditions. So our belief is that, yeah, the uranium was there. There's been sufficient uranium to be there that has converted into lead 206. But that uranium's just been removed. So whatever concentration of uranium was there is no longer there, and it's moved down. That's how you build up these things. That's how you build roll fronts in all of these in the American deposits, in these roll front type of deposits. That it's a continuously moving roll front fluid system that builds up its uranium system as it continues to grow and advance. We're seeing the same type of idea here in structural play in the Athabasca. So I think that the clay that we're seeing, these lead isotopes, all of this is indicative of a very large fluid system that has had the right conditions to move uranium and leave the lead behind. That's how we use lead isotopes to vector in. That's how we use lead isotopes to hopefully discover the next big Athabasca high-grade uranium deposit, because these are the type of clays that I have seen around high-grade uranium deposits, around Millennium, around Griffin, around Phoenix, around ACKIO. We've got the right type of clays, and I do believe we got the right type of chemical signatures that indicate we're onto the right system. Just needs more drilling. We've got 5 million in the bank to do that drilling this year. We are very encouraged. Just again, remain patient about the assays. They're still out there. They should be on their way. We're waiting for the ACKIO U308 results. We're waiting for the holes 21 to 23 to really just emphasize this story and hopefully build up more of what we're seeing, because this area is the area that we are all very encouraged about, and we want to go back there and drill it as things are planned right now. It looks like middle of May we will be going up there. We'll be getting camp ready, getting the drills in. Hopefully by the end of May, early June, we'll be drilling away. Cashed up for it. Great situation to have, and hopefully a discovery here really changes the company's forward-looking motion. I think a discovery out here just really benefits, especially including ACKIO. It grows this area. We get that hub and spoke going, and we've got more pounds in the ground. Remain patient. Time will tell. We'll get the assays. We'll get drilling. Baselode, part of the OR group of companies, a truly phenomenal group of companies that have been very successful. I've made some forward-looking statements. We do believe that we're onto something here, so kind of had to. And that's how you contact us. Thanks for watching.